quiz show or game show has been a staple of television since its inception decades ago. From the general public and its promise of winning prizes and cash to celebrities pitting their wits against each other, quiz game shows have been simple, fun and cutting edge, but nearly always entertaining. Before we count down our favourites, here are some facts, and I'm going to do it in my best Tony Green voice. Here we go. In 1. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire prevents contestants from cheating while using the Phone a Friend lifeline by having the chosen friends sit with fully briefed security officers who prevent them from consulting the internet and all other forbidden references. In 2, the answer in the form of a question format for Jeopardy was specifically designed to win back public favour after the 50s saw a wave of game shows that were fixed by their networks. In 3, with over 8,000 episodes, Countdown is one of Britain's longest running game shows. The original French version, here we go, Des chiffres et des lettres, numbers and letters, has been running on French television continuously since 1965. In 4, the first quiz show on British television was probably Spelling Bee in 1938. An important milestone was the first show to offer prizes, lamps, electric irons, etc. In 5, the longest career as a game show host for some 40 years and 275 days was achieved by Pat Sajak in the USA in Culver City, California, USA on the 7th of June 2024. Pat began hosting Wheel of Fortune in September 1981. After 41 seasons, his last show aired on June 7th, 2024. In 6, oh, that was terrible. In 6, historians widely regard a radio quiz show called the Brooklyn Eagle Quiz on current events as the first ever game show. Debuting in 1923 on WYNC, it included trivial questions created by a local newspaper. In 7, the biggest homegrown UK game show winner is Graham Fletcher, who was a rollover contestant on luck-based show Red or Black, scooping £1.5 million. In 8, we're nearly finished, the 1% Club has become the biggest game show on UK television to date, with its current series averaging 5.8 million viewers in consolidated figures. And Bully's special prize, Ken Jennings is the highest earning game show contestant in America of all time, having accumulated a total of $5,296,214 over the course of 20 years. So there you go. And Bully's special prize, blah, 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 doing that again. Anyway, we are here to do game shows, stroke quiz shows. And joining me is a first-time guest joining us this week. He is a podcast coach, a podcaster himself. Please welcome to the podcast, Kieran MacRae.
Hello, happy to be here.
Well, it's so nice to have you. I've got many, many questions to ask you in regards to podcasting. So first of all, what the hell is a podcasting coach?
It's a good first question. So I help people launch and grow their own podcasts. So sometimes people need some help and some clarification with stuff like podcast marketing, and they hire me to coach them through it, much like an athlete might get a coach if he wants to put on more muscle.
Right, okay. So what's the equivalent of steroids in podcast coaching then, that you need to pump them full to get them?
Ooh, interesting. People skills. So you can go to conferences and tell everyone about your podcast. I think that would be it.
Is that what you say? Is that the number one thing? Is networking? I mean, look, I've been podcasting for over 11 years now.
Fantastic.
And I feel that the one thing that I've gotten out of it, the one thing I've always said to people, don't ever go into podcasting to make money, because it's not a thing to make money unless you become one of the top 1% of it or whatever. It's who you meet, and it's who you would never have met in your normal life. Mm-hmm. So is that one of the sort of top tips that you would say is a key to a good podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. I think definitely finding your enjoyment out with monetary gain is a good call, unless you're using it for your business. Mm. But if you're doing it for a hobby, yeah, just have fun. Use it as an excuse to meet people. And yeah, if you're growing your podcast, I'm very bullish on talking to people in person. If there's some sort of event where your potential fans would all hang out, going along and talking to them.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, now you've got an ebook that has just come out, or is just in the process of coming out, isn't it? Come out. We'll put the link in the show notes for it. But not to try and preempt what's in your ebook, but if you could give somebody, because I've spoken to many people that have said, oh, I'd love to do a podcast. And I just say to them, well, just go and do it. You could literally do it on your phone. You don't need masses of equipment, and you don't need, if you want to do it, just go out and do it. What would you say are maybe the top 3 tips for somebody that is listening to this thinking, I really want to do a podcast? What would you say would be the top 3? And again, I'm not trying to preempt what you've got in your book, but just give us an idea.
Yeah, I think pick who it's going to be for. Don't try and do an everything podcast. Kind of pick someone in mind who's going to enjoy it, which is sort of somewhat bucked by your podcast because it's just a general podcast.
Although we are called the top 10 of anything, not 10 of everything, so I feel like we've not got that problem.
I think so. I think you've found your audience, but so if you're going to do like films, say, kind of find an angle for films, and then kind of lead into that, so you can build an audience around it who also are passionate about that thing. That's probably the top advice. The other advice is, as you said, just start. Just find some way to make it happen. Like if you can, like buy a microphone. But I've always recorded in GarageBand because it was free on my computer already.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And hosting doesn't have to be too expensive. So don't make it a bigger deal than it is. Because especially if it's your first time creating anything, just have fun. It's gonna be a journey. Just be happy to be on board. And then the third piece of advice, I think, tell people about it. A lot of podcasters I talk to online, I'm quite big on Twitter, at Kieran MacRae, if you are as well. They'll talk to me and I'm like, oh, who have you told? I'm like, oh, I'm too scared to tell anyone. I was like, oh, well, no one's going to listen. So, yeah. I mean, it still becomes quite a secluded thing, especially, I mean, back in the day when we were doing, myself and Neil were doing other podcasts, we'd have guests in this sometimes squeeze guests in. And obviously COVID put a kibosh on that. And then since then, the one thing I've always seen that COVID, especially in podcasting, is where the line was drawn. Because it was a niche thing before COVID. You obviously had people like Ricky Gervais and even Joe Rogan. They were massive, but not many people knew what a podcast. If you went up to the average Joe in the street, they wouldn't know what a podcast is. And being in the position where we had a relatively successful podcast at that time, we had have you ever heard the TV show This Country? No, I don't know that one.
No, it was a BBC comedy, 2016, 2017, won BAFTAs. So we did a podcast about that show. Cool. And we were doing very, very well. We managed to get some amazing guests, but we got some really amazing guests during COVID because, especially like actors and musicians, we knew that sometimes you'd go out and try and get hold of guests, and they'd always say, well, I'm really busy. Oh, sorry, I can't. They had no excuse during COVID. We knew they were sat on their ass at home. So we managed to get like Armando Iannucci and Tom Davis and Paul Feig, the Hollywood director, and people like that. So
fantastic.
That kind of thing. And that is what Twitter is amazing for, if you can use it right. But then all of a sudden, because people are at home doing nothing, these sometimes B, C-list celebrities, but they've got contacts, everybody and their mum starts doing a podcast. So I wonder as well, in your honest opinion, is there any way you could stop so many people doing podcasts? Because when you've been doing it for so long, you think, oh my God, he's not got a podcast now. And then everybody, it went from sort of like becoming a niche thing to everybody is now doing a podcast. And sometimes it feels like quantity over quality.
Yes, absolutely. It's funny, you can see the numbers of like, there's a couple of companies track active podcasts, and it's podcasts that have released an episode, I think in the last 90 days. Some of them might be doing the last 180 days, but there's a huge spike during COVID, and it's just kind of slowly kind of calmed down again, I would say, where I think, there was a burst of enthusiasm. Yeah. Well, if I was going to put people off, I would tell them how much work it is, because it's a little more than you expect.
Amen to that, brother. I'll say.
I also don't want to put off people who want to do it for fun, because it's a lot of work, but it's really rewarding.
I would completely agree. Myself and Neil, we in the last 11 years, I haven't laughed so much than the times when we've tried to record an ad for an episode, and silly little things that will just start as, and that for me is the joy. And also it's the joy of not necessarily meeting famous people, because that's wonderful, but just getting friends in America and and friends all over the world, and meeting people like you, because again, we would never meet if it wasn't for podcasting.
No, absolutely not.
So we would never have this one-to-one, and forever now, I know who you are, you know who I am, and I think that's a wonderful thing, especially in a time like now where there's so much division. It's so divisive if you have an opinion on anything. So
yes,
I think it's nice to be able to have that kind of podcasting. I think is still quite a pure entertainment thing, if you like. It's a format that is still quite, but I mean, obviously there are people that will be I don't know, there's people that will be, I'm trying to think of the word,
they'll take the piss.
Yeah, and I mean, I like cutting edge podcasts. I like ones that are a little bit, will just go a little bit out there, but then they get politicized, or especially with Star Wars. Star Wars at the moment is so toxic that it just becomes draining. That's why I think you can shut yourself off with your own podcast. It's another reason why I think podcasting is just a beautiful thing to do. So how long have you actually been podcasting then? Because you said before we went on air that you've got your own podcast as well.
Yes, I co-host a podcast with my wife, Generally Spooky History, all about spooky Scottish history, which we were actually a COVID podcast. We started in 2021. So
God damn you!
I know.
No.
So compared to your 11 years, I'm a relative newbie, but I've been in online marketing and like blogging for about 9 years now.
Right.
So yeah, we're 3. It was in April time we launched, so like 3 and a bit years now.
Right. So would you say that podcasting was the natural sort of thing after blogging? That was like the natural progression?
Yeah, there's a lot of things have changed within blogging, mainly thanks to Google. But a lot of people then moved on from blogging, have either gone into podcasting or to YouTube. It's kind of been the two ways to go about it. And sometimes there's a crossover with like video podcasts like this one. But for me, I'm not super interested in learning how YouTube algorithms work and like playing that game. So podcasting for me was the really natural progression. And me and my wife started it for fun as a project we could work on together. And it was just so much more fun and engaging than I'd ever had in like other online marketing endeavors. So
right. And before we start our top 10, then just tell us a little bit about the ebook.
Yeah, so I've just released an ebook called It's How to Get Your First 100,000 Podcast Downloads. So if you have a podcast that's tootling along and you want to market it, but you have no idea about marketing, then this book will help. Gives you that sort of 10 step-by-step. It's a 10-step guide that takes you through all the things you have to think about if you're going to market and grow your show.
Well, there you go. We could all use a bit more extra marketing. I completely believe that. Okay, I will put the link in the show notes, so please click on that if you want to. But we're here to sort out our top 10 quiz stroke game shows.
Yes.
How hard did you find compiling your top 10?
Ooh, not too bad. I've gone much more into game show than quiz show to maybe bend the category a little bit. But they came out pretty quick once I started thinking about it.
Okay, that's interesting. I have to admit, I mean, obviously looking at you now, I feel that you're quite a young whippersnapper. So I may have to explain some of my ones to you, because I think they might have been way before you were born. But we'll see. I mean, we'll see. Now, before we go in, I forgot to line that up. We've got to do this.
Lisa's Challenge.
What the fuck are you saying?
Okay, it's Lisa's Challenge. So basically, we need to try and work out, you need to tell me how many you think we're going to have the same in our top 10, and I'll tell you as well. What do you reckon?
I've got some pretty out there ones. So
okay. I
think if we have 3, we'll do pretty well.
Okay, I'm going to go with 1.
You think?
Oh, no. No, I'm going to go 2. Let's go 2. So you say 3, I say 2. Let battle commence. Okay, what is your number 10 quiz stroke game show?
So my number 10 show was my dream game show as a child, and it is 50-50.
50-50. 50-50.
Does that mean anything to you?
That sounds familiar.
It was in the 90s, I think into the early noughties, and it was a kids game show. I think it was on CBBC or something, where they took schools in, and the schools then competed in this like giant kind of inflatable, I don't even know, course. And it just looked like the most fun anyone had ever had. And it was always, I'm from the north of Scotland, so it was always schools in and around England who were competing. And I was always mad jealous that my school never got asked to go on to 50-50.
It definitely sounds familiar, and I don't know who hosted it.
There's a few kids presenters, but it was like a blue and yellow logo.
I can see the logo, yeah. It sort of sounds familiar. But again, see, I think, so what sort of, you say this is the 90s?
Yes, I think I looked up earlier and it was 95 to like 2004 or something.
Yeah, I'd have been very weird if I was looking at children's quiz programs when in sort of like my mid-20s or coming on to 30s. I think that would have definitely looked really weird.
Yeah, that's fair.
So that was a CBBC game. Yeah, Sally Gray, who hosted it.
Yeah,
wow.
There's lots of like, I feel, because I'd really enjoyed going on like the bouncy castle, like as a kid, like at the leisure centre.
Right.
And this was like the bouncy castle on steroids.
Wow. I must say as well, for our American listeners now, please use this episode as an education, because I'm pretty sure we're not going to have any American quiz shows. Now we may have the British version of American quiz shows, and I'm not sure what the name would be, but American listeners, please use this to go to YouTube and just enjoy some of the stuff that we're going to talk about, because the one thing that the British can do is sometimes there's some batshit crazy quiz shows. They don't say, when you say them, they don't seem like they should work, but the majority of them usually did. So I just thought I'd put that out there.
Yes,
a great
smart
one to start. So CBBC. And remember, I'll get some clips from YouTube to put in our video playlist for our Patreon top heads as well. So you can watch that and enjoy as well. So my number 10. I think if I'm correct, this is my most up-to-date one, and I'm going for Total Wipeout.
Oh, very nice.
Now, the American version, John Henson, John Anderson, and then in the British version, it was Richard Hammond and Amanda Byram, I think I've got written down here. So 2008, 2009. I'd say, again, same with you. I mean, it was almost like it was an adult version of 50-50, but a bit more intense.
That's my number 3 is Total Wipeout.
Wow, we've got one already. Oh, my God. Yeah, I think it was just, if you're talking about batshit crazy, I mean, how people really didn't get hurt on some of those, especially, I mean, the American one, am I right, if I remember it right, like the last bit is where they're being flung by some kind of rubber band or something right into the air or something. It was in nighttime, wasn't it? And like their last, it might be a completely different bloody show. I can't remember.
I haven't seen the American one, I don't think.
Anyway, but it's always like really crazy with wheels and just stuff.
Big, like the big spinning like arm that everyone had to jump over. So you were stood on a little platform as this big arm spun around, and you had to jump over it and land on your little platform.
That's right. And then anybody that ended up falling in the water would go out. And they had like an assault course. I think they had mud, but also had like punch, like fists, like boxing gloves sticking out that would punch them in the face as they were. Yep. And they'd be covered in head to foot with mud, but then they'd end up falling into the water and get themselves clean. And it was total madness.
It really was. It was a wonderful show.
But it's such. I don't think it's on anymore, is it? I think it's stopped.
No, I when I was looking up on Wikipedia earlier, I said it had stopped. Like 2012, I think it last aired in the UK.
Right. But yeah, it was a 2008, 2009 show. But yeah, but they show them all the time on the TV, don't they? There's always one of them.
It's always worth a watch. When it came out, I was doing parkour at the time, like free running.
Really?
I did that when I was in my teens at school. So whenever I was watching this show, I was like, I would be so good at this. Like, I have this.
Why didn't you ever go in for it?
I think I did look up, but you had to be 18, and I just turned 18 like as it was ending, so I missed my chance. But
I mean, that could have scratched 2 itches. Then that could have scratched your Total Wipeout and your 50-50 itch,
right?
Couldn't it? In one fell swoop.
I know.
And
Could have been great. I even
could
looked
have
up
been.
like booking it for birthdays and things. I was like, I wonder if you can just go to the course, but the course itself was in Argentina, I think,
Yes, I
somewhere in
think it
South
was.
America.
I think it was because I think they've just filmed all the different country versions on the
Mm,
same field or yeah.
whatever it
Oh my
was, yeah.
God. Okay, so we've got one already. We've got one duplicate already. So Kieran, let's have your number 9.
So my number 9 is a classic, and it is Weakest Link.
Oh, okay. Yes, it didn't make my top 10.
Oh, I wondered. That was one I suspect we might both have.
Yeah, yeah,
With
yeah.
Anne Robinson. That was
Yes.
for me, like an after school before dinner. I'd watch it and just be so, I don't know, I was just like transfixed by how horrible Anne Robinson was as a host. She was so just like cutting and mean. I was just, I couldn't look away.
She was very good. I met Anne Robinson.
Did you?
Yeah, in a shop in the town where I live. I used to work in a men's clothes shop, and she popped in, and I asked for her autograph. And this was before Weakest Link, so before she had the school mistress kind of image, you know. And I said, "Oh, would you mind if I have your autograph?" And she said, "Why would you want my autograph, my dear? Why would you want that?" And I've never seen anyone with more face fuzz than Anne Robinson. She had like this orange sort of downy fluff all over her face, and yeah, she looked like a peach. But yeah, it's one of those shows because it was massive in America. I think it might even didn't it come back? I think
it came back
at
with
the
a
moment.
different host.
Yeah,
I saw, but Anne Robinson is peak for me.
Absolutely, absolutely.
What did she do? I only know her from Weakest Link. What did you know her from?
So she was also, she did Points of View. You're probably, again, too young to remember Points of View.
No.
But she did that, and I think she was just like a celebrity. She was like had a column in the newspaper and stuff, and she must have been doing other stuff. So for me to know her then, but yeah, it was massive in America as well. And I think she did the American version as well, didn't she?
Oh, I think she did.
I think she did. Yes, I think she made a fair amount of money on that.
There's no one replacing Anne Robinson.
Absolutely, you couldn't. I mean, you know, everybody likes a stern woman sometimes, don't they? Telling you what to do. That probably says too much about me than it does about anything else.
I remember seeing an outtakes of it. I don't know if it was on YouTube or if it was for like a charity thing in the telly, but it would show her breaking character and just like bursting out laughing. I was like, oh my God, I'm through the looking glass now.
Yes. It's kind of like with Wizard of Oz when they pull the curtain back.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel right, does it, when you see her smiling? Because she was so good at, even when people were laughing, she would be very stern and watching goodbye and just making them just naff off. Yeah, very good. That is a really good one. Okay, my number 9, it's another classic. And this one for me was like the one that you would rush home to watch after school. Give me a P, please, Bob. It was Blockbusters. Now, I didn't realise that it had quite so many hosts. I've only ever really watched it with Bob Holness, because Bob Holness was the OG, if you like. But I used to love that show. It was just, I was at the right age for Blockbusters. So you basically have a board. Now, I think if I can remember correctly, I don't know how many it was. If you went left to right, you had 5 questions you had to answer, but it was a duo that would answer the questions, and then one person on their own would be able to go from top to bottom, and that was 4 questions. And each letter, you have to say, I'll have a P, please, Bob, or I'll have a G, please, Bob, to make the link from one side to the other, or top to bottom, and then you do the gold run at the end.
Oh, interesting.
Have you never heard of Blockbusters?
I don't know Blockbusters, no.
Really? Wow. That is amazing.
I know.
That is amazing, because it was, and the one thing about Bob Holness, who was the original host and was the host for years, the urban legend about Bob Holness was that he played saxophone on Jerry Rafferty's hit Baker Street. Now, I don't think he did, but for some reason, that was an urban legend that Bob Holness, and every time you see him, or every time I see the name now, the first thing I think of is Baker Street by Jerry Rafferty. Really weird. I don't know why where that came from or why. But it was such, and then it came back in the 2000s, and I think it came back again a couple of years ago as well. I think Dara O'Brien was the host.
Okay, well, I must have come in the middle when it was on break.
Yeah, probably. But it was such a good show, and it was students that always were the contestants, and then they have to do the gold run, and that was just a whole. I'll put a gold run in the video playlist for our Patreon subscribers. It's just you can't explain it. It's just too wordy, so I'm just letting people go and see it. Okay, your number 8, then, please, Kieran.
Number 8 is also one that's come back, but I'm talking the original Crystal Maze.
That's my number 3.
Oh,
That's
fantastic!
my number 3. Yes, Crystal Maze.
Because I'm a huge Richard Ayoade fan. I really like him, but Crystal Maze for me was the original. I forget his name, but the original host,
Richard O'Brien. Richard O'Brien was the original.
Yes, superb. Just an utterly mad show, and just the chaos of it at the very end, them going into the big pyramid to try and grab whatever it was they were trying to grab. I don't know, just, again, spellbinding.
Yeah, you had like, it was little gold bits of paper and little silver bits of paper. And you had, so every time you did one of the mini games or went to one of the rooms, if you did it correctly, you won a crystal. And I think the crystal equated to 5 seconds in the crystal maze at the end.
That was it. Yep.
So however many they had, they would go, start the engines, please. And then all of the bits of paper would fly up into this crystal maze. And then all these people then would have to be grabbing as many as they could, put them in these little Perspex boxes. And you had, again, I can't remember exactly, but you had to get, I think it was 100, was it 100 gold to win? But then any silvers you had to take away from your gold. So if you got 150 gold and 75 silver, then you wouldn't win because they'd take them away.
Oh, it's just so stressful.
It's so stressful. And like all you're doing is watching. You're not even taking part.
I know. But there's something about watching it, and when they have loads of time, I forget how much was a lot, but they have like a minute and a half, and they're in there just scrambling, and you're almost shouting at the TV, wondering what they're doing. Just, so stressful. So enjoyable, though.
And the beautiful thing about that game show as well is the games that they're playing, where they get in, they choose a person, and that person gets locked into a room, and it can be a game of agility or a game of mental strength, or hitting a bullseye with a pea gun or something, something to do to win the crystal. Even though you've got no power over it, I can remember still shouting at the TV, saying, "No, don't do this, do that." Just the same as like their contestants' friends outside the room. But yeah, Richard O'Brien was great because he had a little bit like Richard Ayoade. He's got that sort of really cutting sort of sense of humor. He's very dry. Yeah, very dry and very laid back. But he has some real humdinger, some sort of comebacks every so often. Especially if they got somebody locked in, because if they didn't do it in a certain amount of time, they'd be locked in. Yeah, and then they'd have to either leave them there for the rest of the game or buy them out with a crystal, which then meant they'd have one less crystal in the crystal maze. So good choice. Yeah, that was my number 3. That's Excellent. Your number 8. Wow, we've got 2 already. That really is a surprise.
I know.
My number 8. Now, this is one you definitely won't remember. But this was one from my childhood, and it's called Runaround.
No, don't know that one.
No. Do you ever used to watch EastEnders?
I did not, no.
You did not? Okay, right. So there was a stand-up comedian called Mike Reed. Not the DJ, but the stand-up comedian. And he was also in EastEnders. He was... but going back years. He's passed away now. He was the original host, and it was a kids quiz show. And basically, I'm assuming they were all from schools, but there would be like a gang load of kids. He would ask a question, and there was like A or B, and then so he'd ask the question, and then he'd go run around, and they'd have to run onto the A or B for whatever answer they thought it was.
Oh, that sounds a little bit familiar.
Yeah, and then whoever got it wrong were out, and then whoever got it right would then go in. They do another question, and it was just the fact that Mike Reed was very Cockney, and the way he'd say "run around now" and all that kind of stuff. But they also had things like, I can remember watching the Pet Shop Boys. Their very first performance was on that show. The band that became Tears for Fears, I can't remember what they were called. Graduate, I think, something like that. They were on there, so they'd have like and now here's so-and-so with their latest single. And so it was very random. It was really weird.
Random.
Yeah, really random. But it was so much fun. It was such a fun, and there were So they, well, again, these names. Well, Johnny Vegas did a version of it in 2002, but you had Leslie Crowther, who was a British game show legend. Really, he did a lot of different game shows. Stan Boardman, the comedian, Bill Oddie, one of the goodies, also hosted it as well. But it was a lot of fun, and I watched a little bit from, I think it was 1976, I think it was. And oh my God, like I now looking at it through adult eyes, you think, oh my God, this used to be entertainment. But I suppose it's the same if you saw 50-50 now, you might sort of look at it and think, oh dear me.
I know. I don't think it would cut it anymore.
No, it didn't take much to keep us entertained in those days, because it was just 3 channels when I first started watching telly, and that was it. So yeah, kids today, they got no idea how lucky they are. Okay then, Kieran, your number 7 then, please.
My number 7 was a family favourite. It was a Friday night classic, and that is Mock the Week.
Oh, okay.
Because some of my favourite comedians were on Mock the Week. It was hosted by Dara O'Brien.
That's right.
Who would then, they'd kind of set up... Oh, I'm confusing it with Have I Got News for You now? Because they were on one after the other, from what I remember.
Yeah.
But there was Dara O'Brien, and the regular kind of like hosts where they rotated the guests were Russell Howard, who's really funny.
Yeah.
Hugh Dennis, who's amazing. And Scotland's Frankie Boyle.
Wow, Frankie Boyle, yeah. I mean, is he allowed on television these days? I don't know if he is he?
Kind of went off the deep end a bit, didn't he? But
he did.
His prime Mock the weekdays, they were superb.
Right, because it was, wasn't it? Yeah, it was Mock the Week, and then Have I Got News for You afterwards, wasn't it?
Yes,
I think.
typically.
Yeah. But I think, again, that's not on anymore, is it? Mock the Week. I think they stopped that, didn't they?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, no, is it still going, is it?
No, I don't think it's on anymore.
Oh, right.
Because, it was just stand-up comedians would come on and they'd do the panel and they just offer humorous comments. It was just always enjoyable.
Yeah. I mean, I must admit, it's been a long time since I've seen it. I mean, Dara O'Brien is one of those guys that is always good at whatever he seems to do, isn't he? I think he's a very good host.
I got to see him live in Glasgow, do some stand-up comedy, and it was excellent. But it was really funny at the end of the show, because he's like, right, that's the end of the show, but it's not actually the end. I'm going to do it, like, you have to applaud, and then I'll come back out. And you'd think I wouldn't have to tell you that, but I'm not very famous, so people just start leaving. So then he goes off, we all have to applaud, and he comes straight back on again. It was superb.
I mean, that's a good way of doing it. I forgot. Yeah. That's a good way of getting a standing ovation, isn't it? Or at least get applause more and more.
What? Oh, for the encore, that was it.
Exactly. Very good. Okay, so that's your number 7. My number 7 is one of the classics. This is one of the ones I really wonder whether I should put this in my top 10, because it's sort of so bad that it's good. And it's Bullseye. Started in 1981. It's the darts one with Jim Bowen, where I got the in one from, and the theme tune. This is the theme tune to Bullseye. It was a darts based quiz show that was famous for. I think Peter Kay does a brilliant bit about Bullseye, about the fact that like the jackpot prize would be a boat. And the person that would win it would live in Tamworth, where he's like 150 miles away from any water. So and it was always, was it Bullseye or was it 3-2? Oh no, it might be 3-2-1. Sorry. There's another urban legend that Fred and Rose West were in the we're in the audience of 3-2-1, which was another 80s. It always sends a shiver down my spine, that one. But Jim Bowen was a great stand-up comedian. It came back in the early 2000s, I think, with Dave Spikey, who was in Phoenix Nights, and I think if I'm not mistaken, I think Tony Green was doing the sort of the calling out as well. But if you love darts, it was great. And it has so many catchphrases. That was the thing that Jim Bowen loved, was nothing in this game for 2 in a bed, and stay out of the black and in the red. Nothing in this game for 2 in a bed. You need to watch it. I don't know whether have you ever seen it, Kieran?
It would be the kind of thing that was on when I'd like go round to like my parents' friend's house. So I've seen it. I can picture the logo, but it's not one I ever sat and watched.
Yeah, but it was so like 80s and so very sort of TV, where it was, you know, you get a fiver for winning getting a question right. You know, so they'd finish and they'd won £75, and they're going, oh, look at all this money that you've won, and you know, they win a cassette recorder and stuff like that, and you watch it now. But my wife always rolls her eyes when it comes to like a Sunday afternoon and we're flicking for something to watch, and there'll be like an hour of Bullseye on. I think, oh, we'll just watch this, and she'll go, oh no, not again. And you just go back to like the early 80s and just watch some really crap TV that was just, but it was such a massive hit. It was crazy. Anyway, okay, your number 6 then, please, Kieran. My
number 6 is Pointless.
Okay.
Has that made your list, perhaps?
It hasn't made my list. No, like I said, Total Wipeout 2008, 2009 is the most recent that I've got. Yeah. So I'm not going to have something like Pointless.
Yeah. So Pointless is hosted by, is it Armitage, Richard Armitage? Because it was part of a comedy duo, and I forget which half.
Oh no, it's the
other half.
Alexander Armstrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, with Richard Osman in the chair.
Yeah, looking up the answers.
Looking up the answers, yeah.
But yeah, they'd bring up a category and they'd asked 100 people to like name countries on the equator, and then you had to put in your guess, and you had to guess something that nobody else had guessed. And it's a good show. It's so just gentle and wholesome. It always makes me think of coming home for Christmas to my parents' house, because they'd always be watching Pointless. So we'd always watch Pointless before dinner.
Yeah. And it's one of those shows that always makes me roll my eyes, is because there obviously isn't a studio audience there. But they'll put like canned clapping or canned laughing every so often if somebody says something relatively funny. And
I know, it's only...
There's no need to do that. Don't do that.
At most, it's humorous, isn't it?
Yeah, it's never laugh out funny that a whole audience would laugh at, but they'll put this tiny little 3 seconds of ha, oh, and then it just stops.
Yeah.
Same as the clapping. Just don't bother.
Just don't do it.
Yeah, there's no need. I can understand, because I think that sort of came along during COVID, when a lot of quiz shows, I think like, what's the one that Richard Osman does? House of Games.
Yes.
When that never has I don't think that ever has a actual audience, but they don't seem to put clapping, I don't think, on that.
Yeah.
It ruins it a bit, because you don't need to have it.
Yeah, it's a bit of a strange one, isn't it? And it was always funny to me, because we used to watch Armstrong and Miller. That's right. Yes. It was a sketch show that he did with someone Miller.
Ben Miller. Ben Miller.
And it was the funniest thing ever. So when Pointless started, I'm like, oh, this is going to be really funny, because he's really funny. And he's just quite gently asking people for the answers in a sort of very calm voice like this. And I was like, oh, that was Pointless. Thank you very much. And
yeah,
I was like, oh, where's the doing backflips at the back of an exam hall when no one's looking?
Yeah. It's a very gentle quiz, isn't it? But it's one of those sort of pure general knowledge ones where you can look very, very, you can have, you know, you can get into fights with your wife about them, because you think you're right, she thinks she's right.
Yeah.
I mean, she's always right, but you know
Obviously.
what I mean. When it comes to general knowledge, it didn't quite make my top 10. I must admit, that's probably one of 2 or 3 quizzes that are on now that I would watch. You know, but it just didn't make my top 10.
That's
fair.
Never mind. That's fair.
Okay. My number 6. We've done the darts quiz show, so I'm now going to do the snooker quiz show. So this was Big Break from the 90s. Now again, young Kieran there.
Yep.
He's looking confused. So Jim Davidson, who is a stand-up comedian, and John Virgo, who's a snooker legend, and it was a snooker-based quiz show, basically. So they would have
interesting.
They would have snooker players, and they would be paired with members of the general public. The members of the general public would answer questions, and then the snooker players would have a certain amount of time to pot as many balls as they could. And there were prizes on the show on the BBC, and it was lots of fun. And I think it was Chaz and Dave did the Big Break. You don't even know who Chaz and Dave are, do you?
I do not. Sorry.
God, I have never felt so old doing a podcast. Chaz and Dave were like a Cockney duo that would sing sort of piano-based songs. I'm not even going to bother explaining what they are. But they did the theme tune to Big Break. I'm going to look like an absolute madman if I decide I'm going to sing it for you, so I'm not going to bother. I will leave
Caught
that.
yourself.
I will leave that. Yeah, just Google it, people. It's a really, really good. Oh dear me, we should have.
It's
maybe
a
done
very British sounding quiz show, that one.
It's a very British quiz show, but it was a lot of fun. And for me, in those days, I was massively into snooker, so I knew all of the snooker players that were there, and it was your Alex Higgins, Steve Davis, all the big snooker players would go on there. I think I know a couple of snooker players from today, so I don't think it would work for me if they brought it back, because I don't know any of the snooker players, but the snooker players back in the day then had a lot more character, and you knew who they were, and they all had their own little thing, you know.
Yeah, a lot more personality.
A lot more personality, indeed.
And just, you put a timer countdown, and it's always entertaining.
Well, that's the thing, because then it even makes the professional players just panic, because they've got 30 seconds to try and hit 6 balls in, and they do it for fun when they're at home, but doing it like that, it was an absolute nightmare. But yeah, a lot of fun. Right, we're halfway through.
Excellent.
So it's time for this.
Pop quiz, hot shot.
Pop quiz, hot shot. It's time for the quiz. So what I'm going to do, this is going to be fun. I'm going to give you the names of some presenters of a quiz show or a game show, and you need to tell me what the quiz or game show is.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, we'll have a go.
Well, let's have a go. Okay, so number one, because you're probably not even going to know any of these names, to be fair. So this could be like...
I'm not the best with the names generally either.
Oh,
so
right, okay.
This is going to be tricky.
So number one is Lisa Tarbuck, Simon Mayo, and Michael Aspel.
Ooh, Simon Mayo. He was a DJ, wasn't he?
He was a DJ. I think he still is.
That's something to go on. What did they host?
Yeah. If you don't know, just have a guess.
Did they host the Big Fat Quiz of the Year?
No, they didn't. It was Blockbusters, actually. It was Blockbusters. Okay, number two. Bruce Forsyth, Leslie Crowther, Bob Warman, and Joe Pasquale.
Oh, now. I can picture Bruce Forsyth on a game show, quiz show type thing. I'm going to go for like a Wheel of Fortune.
It was The Price is Right. Okay. Bob Monkhouse, Max Bygraves, and Les Dennis.
That one. Supermarket Sweep.
It was Family Fortunes, where that sound comes from. Number four, Terry Crews, Jimmy Kimmel, and Chris Tarrant.
Now. Oh, that's a collection. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Well done.
When did Terry Crews host that?
That's the American version.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he hosted it. Jimmy Kimmel hosted it. Obviously, Jeremy Clarkson has hosted the latest version. Okay, you should get this one. Number five. Edward Tudor Pole and Richard Ayoade.
Crystal Maze.
Is correct. Yes, well done. Number six, William G. Stewart, Adam Hills, Sandy Togsvig.
QI?
No, it was 15-1. It was a Channel 4 quiz show. Number seven, David Ruprecht, Dale Winton, and Leslie Jones.
Oh, I'm blanking of all game shows.
I'll give you a clue. You've already said this in one of your incorrect answers.
Oh, Supermarket Sweep.
It's correct.
Hey!
Well done.
I appreciate that.
Well done. Number eight, Magnus Magnusson, Peter Snow, and Clive Anderson.
Is it a sports quiz?
It's not, no.
Oh, okay.
Although there may be sports questions in there every so often.
Oh, I'm just a question of sport. No.
It was Mastermind. And
Oh.
finally, Davina McCall, Brian Dowling, and Emma Willis.
That is, of course, Countdown.
No, it's Big Brother.
Oh.
But
Oh
it
my
doesn't
God.
matter. I mean, 3, that's not bad.
It's 3 more than I thought I would get.
Well, that's good. Well, as long as you're happy with that, that's fine. That's cool. But yeah, 30%, mate, that's not too bad. That's definitely not the worst we've had. So well done. Because I wasn't expecting you to get many after what we've said about names and stuff. Okay, back to the job in hand. What's your number 5, please, Kieran?
My number 5 is another kids one, sort of similar in vibe to Crystal Maze, and that is Jungle Run.
Right. Now you're going to have to explain one to me now.
Okay, well, Jungle Run was, I forget who the hosts were. It was, I don't know if it was Ant and Dec, someone of that caliber. And you would go on, and there'd be these kind of like physical challenges you would have to do. So you would be jumping between little platforms to collect something to get time at the end. I feel it was monkeys, because a monkey timer would go off, and so you do all these challenges of various difficulties to collect the time at the end, and then at the end you would go inside a big like gorilla's stomach, and then you would have to complete little like puzzles to get to the next room, and after every like 3 rooms there was a prize, but you had to run out before your timer ended.
So, yeah, it almost sounds a little bit like Crystal Maze. Then.
It's a very kind of similar format, but I remember the prizes always being very, very medium.
Right,
So
okay.
the kids, it was usually like teams of 3 or 4, and they'd go all the way through, and they're like, "You've won some water pistols."
Those days, thinking that kids, like I say, it's a different time. You wouldn't be able to do that these days.
I know.
Would you? If
Mr. Beast has ruined it.
Exactly. If you gave a kid a water pistol as a game and they've just spent an afternoon playing a game, they'd look at you and just swear at you and kick you in the shins and just run off, wouldn't they? Because a water pistol, that's no good.
It was the puzzles were kind of like the sliding tiles where you'd have to like resolve the full picture by like moving one tile. It was all that kind of thing.
Nice. I'm going to have to look at that one on YouTube then. I was just looking, it says that the hosts were Michael Underwood, Dominic Wood, and Chris Jarvis. Oh, they were the Jungle Guides. Sorry, they were the Jungle Guides.
Yeah, it was Dom from Dick and Dom. They had a kids show, Dick and Dom in the bungalow.
And the show was inspired by the Crystal Maze, apparently. So there you go. Yeah, good shout. Okay, my number 5. This was a show that started in 1977 but came back in 2009 with Ben Shepherd. Gordon Burns did the original, and it's the Krypton Factor. Now, have you ever heard of that one?
I've not heard of this one. No, do tell.
So I can remember I think it used to be on a Monday night back when I was a kid, and it was like the cleverest quiz show I'd ever seen. I think there were 4 or 5 contestants, and you had like an agility test. So you had like they were going on a cross country sort of assault course, and it was the first one to win would get points. They had something where they would have all these different pieces that had to come together to make a different shape, and they were against the clock. So it was the first person. They would all be there. They'd take the cover off, and they'd all have a certain amount of time to do it, and the winner of that would get more points than everybody else. Then there'd be quizzes, and then there would be observation rounds, and it just sucked you in because it was like they were very, very clever. And it was kind of a bit like watching University Challenge. If you ever watch University Challenge and you get one question right, you think, I'm the daddy. I got a question right on University Challenge. It was kind of like that. When a question, if you got it, especially with the fact that I would be 8, 9 years old, I got that question right. You'd be really, really, chuffed with yourself. And it was, and then Ben Shepherd brought it back in 2009. I don't think I really watched that, but the original one was just so much fun. But it wasn't entertainment. It was kind of like, just see how clever I am, and if I got one question in a series right, I'd be really, really happy.
Yeah. I used to do something similar with Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, because I'd be quite young watching it. If I could get that first question right to get up from the £50 to the £100, I'd be buzzing. Like, I'm a genius.
Yeah. Well, did you ever try to get on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Did you ever because I can remember when it first started, you had to phone a number up, didn't you? I think.
No, I've never really tried it. It was kind of a location thing because I grew up way up in the north of Scotland and everything's filmed in London.
Right.
So it was the logistics of getting there never really put it in my head to apply for shows.
You
What
could
about
have
you?
been a millionaire though.
I
couldn't
know.
you? Yeah. I just couldn't deal with the stress that if I'd have got through, then you've got to sit with the 12 of them to get that first, finger to the
Yeah.
buzzer thing. So even if you got through, there's no guarantee you're going to be in the main thing. So the stress of having to worry about being the first one to buzz, then have to worry about the stress of being in the middle trying to win money. And then I think the worst thing would be, because I think you got to 16,000, then 32,000.
Mhm.
And then if you got the 32,000 wrong, this is the old way of doing it, you took the 32,000 away with you, didn't you? So if you got to 32, that was the most that you could lose.
Yeah.
You couldn't lose any more. So
Mhm.
you could always go for the 64,000 and it didn't really matter whether you got it wrong or right. And I'd be so like, I'd just want to win 32,000. I wouldn't worry
Yeah.
about anything else. It's just too much stress. It just
Would be
feels
a
like
lot of stress.
I couldn't handle that. No, it's just not up for me. Okay, then, Kieran, your number 4, then, please.
My number 4 is Robot Wars.
Oh, right. Okay.
I kind of class that as a game show.
Yeah, I would
Quite
absolutely.
a technically difficult one to enter, but yeah, loved Robot Wars with Craig Charles as the
Craig
host.
Charles. Yeah.
Because I was a huge Red Dwarf fan, still am. Fantastic British comedy show.
Yeah.
And yeah, just Craig Charles as the host. And I remember being quite young when I first started watching it, and it was the Sir Kill-a-Lot with the lance just used to terrify me. There was so much hyped up drama with like the flame spurts they'd put around and seeing this like face on the robot. Thought it was the most intense thing I'd ever seen.
You know what? I don't think I've ever watched a full Robot Wars episode
No?
all the way through. I don't know why. Because I can imagine it's like loads of fun, but I don't know why I've never ever watched a full episode.
Oh, that's good. I don't know how it holds up now, but for anyone who doesn't know, it's both sides have built a killer robot, which usually has some sort of like spinning disc or like hook attachment to like pneumatically puncture. And just these two robots would fight and they'd have to try and like push each other into like holes on the arena, I guess.
Yeah.
And yeah,
they're like little, like maybe like on wheels. They're like radio controlled cars, but
yeah,
like pimped out with like weapons of death attached to them, haven't they? Yeah. It always reminds me of the Phoenix Nights episode when Max and Paddy have made their own. Have you ever watched Phoenix Nights?
don't think so. No.
Do they just have completely different shows up in Scotland? Do they just not have the same thing?
It's because we've got STV instead of ITV.
Oh, of course it is.
That must be it.
Yeah. Okay, so that's your number 4, Robot Wars. My number 4, again, I'm going to have to explain to you. So Thursday nights in the 80s, okay, it was Top of the Pops on
Nice.
on BBC One, then EastEnders, then probably something like Tomorrow's World, then Only Fools and Horses,
Nice.
and then over to Channel 4 for the Treasure Hunt. Okay, now Treasure Hunt was, and I haven't looked. I hope that there are full episodes on YouTube, because it was a TV newsreader called Kenneth Kendall, and he was in a studio with the TV AM weather girl Wincy Willis, who had a map, and then outside somewhere in the country was Annika Rice with a helicopter, and he would basically be getting clues. He would have a clue, and it would tell Annika Rice. They'd have to work the clue out. They'd have books, encyclopedias, just try. The kids. There was no Wikipedia or internet for that matter in those days. They'd have to do all this trying to work out. So the clue would be a very spurious clue. So I can't even remember what they were, but it was like weird. But it'd have clues in there for where Annika Rice then had to go. And you had an hour. You had an hour in real time that she'd have to get up into the helicopter, and so in the studio they'd be saying, right, you need to go to blah blah blah. On the table would be a map, so it'd almost be like a war room basically, where they'd be moving the helicopters, right? So where are you at the moment?
Fantastic.
And it become sometimes it would be where they would then go to that particular place. She'd have to go and run. She'd have headphones on. And the one thing was always like the cameraman would be chasing Annika Rice, so you just get a shot of her ass all the time, basically. You sort of running in front, and the clock would be ticking down. She would get and find another clue, and then they would stop the clock because they'd have to have a break.
Mm-hmm.
And so then,
catch their breath.
Indeed. And then when they came back, right, what's the clue? So they would read the clue, and off they go again. Sometimes the clue might be in walking range of where she is or running range. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you'd have to run back to the helicopter and off she go again. And it was like an hour of white knuckle stuff. And because it's got the ticking clock, you had that, oh my God, are they going to do it? Are they going to do it? And it was so good. They brought it back. I think they had a couple of different presenters and a couple of different people that took over from Annika Rice every so often. But it was
sad
so
I
much
missed
fun.
this one.
It was so much fun.
Amazing.
Yeah, I would have a look on YouTube and just see if they must be full episodes. There must be. I certainly hope so.
Oh, it just sounds so stressful.
Oh my! It was, and being sort of like I would have been in my teens.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as a teenager, you've got a lot going on in your head anyway. So having to have that as entertainment, you know, to really mess your brain up, is sort of like you didn't really need it, but it was so much fun. It was so much fun. Okay, your number 3 was Total Wipeout.
Yes, indeed.
My number 3 was Crystal Maze. So now on to you for your number 2.
Now, this one's a bit out there. It appeared on the repeats I would watch were on Challenge, I think, which was on Sky, and it's Takeshi's Castle.
Oh, yes. I mean, it didn't make it was very close to being in my top 10 without a doubt.
It was just the most bananas show I'd ever seen. I think I keep saying that, but that's the theme in mind. I want something that's totally out there. Yeah. And it was, I think it was Chinese.
Yeah, it was definitely Asian. It was something like Chinese, Japanese, something like that. But it was batshit crazy. Absolutely.
And all these contestants would have to like run through mazes while samurais chase them, and then they'd have to like run across all these little like mushrooms as fast as they could. But some of them were like they weren't solid, so you just can it into the water. And then it all round up to the final round where you were on a go-kart with a piece of paper and a water pistol, and you had to tear other people's paper before yours got torn. And it seemed the most difficult show I'd ever seen. And I remember once seeing somebody win on a technicality, and I'd been watching for years. I was like, oh my God, they've won. Like, what is the mysterious kind of like emperor figure? Like, what is he going to bestow on them? And he just handed them a very small envelope and the show ended. We don't even get to know what's in the envelope. Very disappointing.
You have to feel that the person that wrote Squid Game was a massive fan of that.
Yes, that was my first thought when it came out. It's like, I've seen a less sinister version of this.
Yes, because it definitely has. Someone's thought, right, Takeshi's Castle, let's really wind it up, like really much, and you know.
So you thought a ticking clock was stressful. Exactly.
I think it's on. Haven't they brought it back on Netflix?
Oh, I hope so.
I think so, and it's Tom Davis and Ramesh Raghunathan who's doing like the commentary.
Excellent.
Over it. It's either Amazon or Netflix. I'm pretty sure it's one of the two. So yeah, but it again. Yeah, like you say, you think that Treasure Hunt is sort of really weird. Takeshi's Castle is something else. It was very close to being in my top 10, I must admit, but it didn't quite make it. Okay, that's your number 2. My number 2 quite easily could have been my number 1, and I'm going for Shooting Stars with Vic and Bob.
Oh, good choice.
Now, I've loved Vic and Bob from the very first moment they appeared on Channel 4 in Vic Reeves' Big Night Out. This was like everything that is great about Vic and Bob. The fact that it was totally out there. You can see how some of the guests, as a celebrity guests that they'd have, would be there going, what the hell is going on? And Vic and Bob just didn't care. They didn't really keep score because George Dawes, who was, Matt Lucas, it never looked like he was properly adding them up.
Yeah. Matt Lucas was like in a baby suit behind the drums, wasn't he? Was that Shooting Stars? Yes.
He was. He's a baby. Yeah, he'd be there. And there'd be some times when he'd be sat behind the drums, like with his bottom lip hanging out. And that's because Mark Lamar had to go and burp him because he was a baby and he just needed burping. and Ulrika Johnson. Me and a friend of mine went and saw the live version
did
of
you?
Shooting Star, and it was so good. It was so much fun. But yeah, they did so many. They did loads of series of it, and it was bonkers, but it was so good. It was just pure Vic and Bob doing what I don't know whether Vic and Bob are like the Monty Python lot in the fact that you either really like them or you just don't get it. I can kind of see that. I can kind of see. I mean, I don't know whether you are a fan of Vic and Bob or whether that's again you are.
Yep.
I think their sitcom House of Fools I thought was like genius, but nobody seemed to watch it for a start. I don't know if you ever seen that.
No, I don't know that one.
Have you not? Oh, it's got Matt Berry, who is just a genius. It's got oh god, I forget his name. The guy that plays Angelos Epithemu, he's in it. It is supposed to be. Well, they set it up like it's Mrs. Brown's Boys kind of sitcom where it's in front of a studio audience, but it has that stupidness of Vic and Bob that if you haven't seen it, try and I mean, you can't find it anywhere. You can get it on like iTunes and stuff, but it's like 25 quid for 3 series or something. But I'm waiting to get paid because I'm going to go and get it because you can't get it anywhere else.
Oh, excellent.
And I would thoroughly recommend it. It's definitely worth it. Okay, before we reveal our number ones, Kieran, if you want to give us a rundown from your 10 to 2, and then I'll do the same.
Sure. So up number 10, we have 50/50. Number 9 is Weakest Link. 8 was Crystal Maze. 7 was Mock the Week. 6 was Pointless. 5 was Jungle Run. 4 was Robot Wars. 3 Total Wipeout. And 2 Takeshi's Castle.
Perfect. And mine is number 10, Total Wipeout. 9, Blockbusters. 8, Run Around. 7, Bullseye. 6, Big Break. 5, The Krypton Factor. 4, Treasure Hunt. 3, The Crystal Maze. And 2, Shooting Stars. So, Kieran, what is your number 1 quiz/game show?
Now, this is a very, very new one because it's only on Netflix as far as I'm aware. And it is Physical 100.
Oh, my goodness. Okay.
Did you catch that?
I have never heard of that in my life. Physical 100. Okay.
Yeah, it's South Korean, and it came out just in the last couple of years, I think. I've heard there's a second season. And they got 100 different athletes from all different like sports to compete to see who had the ultimate physique. So on the very first challenge, everyone had to just hang from a bar over like a swimming pool, and the last person hanging there won. So they had like an Olympic gymnast, one of the UFC fighters, someone Yamakaza, I think. He's Sexy Yama if you watch UFC.
Oh, okay.
And they had like bodybuilders and snowboarders and cyclists. And they just go through these progressively harder physical challenges up until the winner is crowned. But because it's South Korean, it is the most like polite game show I have ever witnessed. So
well, that makes a change.
Yeah. So in Korea, if someone's older than you have to address them a certain way. It's subtitled. So you have to address them politely. So there's lots of like, oh, I was just going to cheer for him, but I forgot he's 1 year older than me. Oh my God, that would have been so embarrassing. And it's just all very like polite, and everyone's just, I don't know, it's just so enjoyable. And it's really weird because the first episode is one by one introducing all 100 contestants. So it's like an hour and a half of everyone slowly coming in, and you get like a little montage of them doing their sport. And I just got so drawn into it. I watched it across like 2 nights, binging I can't remember, it's like 6 to 10 episodes thereabout. Superb. Highly recommend watching.
Wow, I have never... And that you said that's Netflix?
Yes.
Right. So again, it's almost got a little bit of the Squid Game thing about it, I suppose. But then, so when the one person wins, do all 100 still stay in, or do some of them get
so I think
taken out?
On the first challenge, 50 people got eliminated.
Right.
And then 50 went to the next round.
Right, okay.
I think it got put down to 25. And then there was 5 teams of 5 for the next challenge. And it went on like that. One of the challenges, they have to drag a giant wooden ship like across a beach and then up a little ramp. So you just see them all the teamwork happening to make it happen. And you get so invested.
Did you ever see the Squid Game, like actual quiz game show that they did for real people as opposed to the drama?
No, I didn't.
That was extremely weird in the fact that you did get drawn into the people's stories.
Yeah,
But
it happens, doesn't it?
yeah, but they also did weird production kind of things where they fitted everybody with, it wasn't a blood pack, but it was like blue ink, paint ink. So when they ended up getting knocked out, like when they did the cookie where they had to cut the shape out of the cookie, when they failed, the blood pack went off and they were told that they had to like pretend that they'd been shot. Really strange.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was really strange.
That's a hot take.
Yeah, to the point where you could see where some people decided they were going to be very theatrical with it.
Yeah.
And some people that did it, but they had like a big smile on their face, like thinking, this is ridiculous that I'm doing this. But you ended up with their stories. You ended up getting very invested, and they used exactly the same sets that they used for the drama series, and did exactly the same tasks. So I would recommend that as well. You end up getting really sort of turned into it. But I will give that a try because that sounds fascinating. Physical 100. Yep. Okay, my number one choice, we go from Physical 100 to Blankety Blank, which was in 1979. Now, this is going to be way out of your thing, but for me, I think is it UK Gold? Do they still have UK Gold on TV? They started showing them from the very start, and Terry Wogan, you must have heard of Terry Wogan.
Absolutely.
So for me, the GOAT when it comes to hosting quiz shows. And I hadn't watched Blankety Blank for decades. And they put on, from the very first episode, they put like 2 or 3 episodes together, and like every so often they do 3 or 4 together. And I watched them, and I was just so entertained. It was like comedy. I mean, Terry Wogan is brilliant. He's just brilliant at what he does. And Blankety Blank, if anybody knows, you have 6 celebrities, and then you have 2 contestants, and Terry Wogan would read out a sentence, is, my blank is so long that it pokes my wife's eye out. I don't know why I said that. That's terrible. And then the celebrities would write down what they think the blank is, and then the contestant would then say, so Terry Wogan would say, okay, so my blank is so long that it would, poke out my wife's eye, and they would say penis. And so then they would go to each celebrity, and they would turn their cards over, and they would see how many people is correct to what the celebrity, the guest says. Nice. And they'd do 2 rounds of that. Then they would play super match game, and it was just so many things. But it's the banter between Terry Wogan and the celebrities, and obviously they were celebrities from the 70s and 80s. Some of it you wouldn't get away with today, in the bottom row, the middle person would always be like the real comedian. Kenny Everett, I don't know if you've heard of Kenny Everett before.
No, I don't think so.
So he was like a 70s and 80s DJ, but he was like the bad boy. He would come out with some really sort of silly thing, but he was great. He was way ahead of his time. And I would always love it if he was sat in that chair, because you knew that Terry Wogan used to have this really tall and thin microphone. So it was like it was like a wand with like a little BlackBerry on the top. And anytime Kenny Everett was in, he would grab it and he would bend it or break it, and it was just one of the things you wanted him to do. So it reminds me, what you said earlier on about like coming home for Christmas and stuff like that. That's what that show reminds me of. It reminds me of, I think it was on a Thursday night again, just Thursday nights, watching that, having a cup of hot Ribena and a packet of salt and vinegar crisps, and
fantastic.
I'd say takes you back. Yeah. Okay, we've got a couple of honourable mentions. Stu Grant says, I quite enjoy Tenable, love a bit of Warwick Davis, but he also says Bullseye, Nightmare, I'm counting it, he says, Going for Gold, The Hardest Questions Ever, Takeshi's Castle, Ninja Warrior, the Japanese original, and anything hosted by Bob Monkhouse. At Southern View says Blankety Blank with Lily Savage, or for maximum cringe, Mr. and Mrs. Another one way before your time, Kieran.
I know the concept of it, though.
Do you know the concept? Yeah, with Derek Beatty. I can never forget that name. Kit Torbin says, great game show hosts, names go with them too. Grew up with Bamba Gascoigne and University Challenge and Magnus Magnusson on Mastermind. Loved It's a Knockout as a kid too. Yeah, I feel that one's tainted now, It's a Knockout.
It's a Knockout. That's familiar.
Yeah, it used to be I think you used to have counties playing against each other, and it used to be getting dressed up in big inflatable.
Yeah, I remember competing in an It's a Knockout thing. Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah,
Did you? But of
my
course, it had
turn.
it's now got the stink of one of the presenters, Stuart Hall, that was imprisoned for
Ooh.
bad stuff. And finally, at MPG_1980 says Number Wang.
That was my honourable mentions.
Well, there you go. Which was from the Mitchell and Webb sketches.
It was one of the first things I thought of was Number Wang. I was like, that probably doesn't count. But
I mean, it's still a quiz. I would have accepted it in your top 10.
Oh.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Good choice.
But there we go. We've done it. That is our top 10 quiz and game shows. I'm going to go and watch Physical 100 now and see if it makes me want to go and hang by a pole for as long as I can. So, Kieran, where can people find you and find your information? Like I say, I'll put the link to the ebook in the show notes. But if they want to get in touch with you and get your services, what's the best way?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter at Kieran MacRae or on my website, which is platformpodcasting.com. Or listen to my podcast, which is Generally Spooky History.
Generally Spooky. I will put the link to that in the show notes as well. There you go. Okay. And for me, if you want to, any of the information you need, whether it's to join our Patreon, come and be a top head, come and be a guest on your own episode if you want to, all the links are in the show notes. Everything you need to know, just lick at it. All the gubbins is there. Kieran, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you and to speak to you, sir.
Thank you so much.
And I need to try and get STV down here somehow and watch some of the shows that you watch. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching and listening. Now let's go start the countdown.